Hello, my name is Jonathan Harris. Welcome to another 5-minute buyer's guide. Today we're going to talk about the checks you need to make if buying a used Mamiya RB67 lens. Okay, so 3 things you need to check. You need to check the cosmetics, you need to check the mechanics, you need to check the optics. Now, bearing in mind these lenses have been discontinued for well over 25 years, you do need to be careful when buying secondhand, because whilst generally they are reliable, if they've not been well looked after or not been well stored, you could end up with a nightmare, and that obviously you want to avoid. So first of all, let's look at the cosmetics. Have a look at the filter rim. Just make sure there are no nasty dings there. Have a look at the lens mount. Make sure there isn't excessive amount of wear on the lens mount. And then just have a quick look around the lens itself. After a fair bit of use, the black begins to wear away and you can see spots of metal coming through. So you can see relatively easily how much use the lens has had. Now, a few marks, that's inevitable. What you want to do is make sure the lens hasn't been excessively used or misused. If you're happy with the cosmetics, then move on to look at the mechanics. Now, to check the shutter and the aperture, which are both in the lens, the focusing is actually on the camera. So to check the shutter and the aperture, you can either mount it on the camera or you can fire the shutter manually with the lens off the camera. I'd recommend the latter because trying to test it on the big, heavy camera is actually quite awkward. So to test it off the camera, there's a little silver pin just there. You need to push that pin in and pull the shutter cocking pin levers around. So pull these around here and you'll hear the shutter fires. So what you're doing there is just manually activating the mechanism. So first of all, set it to 1 second. And then, as I was doing then, just fire the shutter and just look through, make sure it's opening and closing. Do that 2 or 3 times. You're not timing it. What you're doing is just making sure that it opens, it closes, it doesn't jam open, it doesn't stutter. The timing is roughly consistent. Then move to 1/2 second and repeat the exercise. It opens, it closes, no stuttering, no jamming, that's a good sign. Then go to 1/4 and 1/8 and do the same. If they're fine too, then move on to a 400th, the top speed on this particular lens. Fire the shutter while looking through. Now you're not timing it, again, that's ridiculous. You can't time that speed visually. What you're doing is making sure you can see a quick flash of light. And if you can see a quick flash of light, you know the shutter's opening and closing. With these mechanical lenses, if the top speed is operating and it's opening and closing and the slow speeds are operating without sticking, you can be very confident the intermittent speeds will be okay as well. So that's the shutter. Then move on to the aperture. And with the aperture, you can, again, similar sort of thing. Take it down to f22, push the little pin in on the back and just fire the shutter. And you'll see that the aperture blades, as they close, are forming a symmetrical shape. If they're not forming a symmetrical shape, it could mean an aperture blade has become detached, and that's the problem. That needs a service. So you've checked the shutter, you've checked the aperture. Now, on most RB lenses, that's as far as you can go. But some of you might have spotted there's a focusing ring on this lens, which is unusual. This is the 65mm, and it's got a floating element system. So this isn't actually focusing. What this ring does is to recalibrate the optics for closer subjects. So any lens is calibrated at infinity, and as you focus closer, you lose a tiny degree of sharpness. This secondary ring just compensates for that. There's not much you can check on that. Just really make sure it's moving smoothly from extreme to extreme. You can also look in and just make sure that the ring is actually moving the optics inside, which you can see. So once you're happy with the mechanics, then move on to the optics. Open up the aperture, open up the shutter, and just look through the lens. You want to make sure the lens is clear of misting. You want to make sure the lens is clear of fungus. 1 or 2 tiny spots of dust, actually quite common in these lenses. That isn't too much of an issue, but just make sure there's no fungus, no fungal growth, and make sure there's no misting. Then have a look at the front and the rear elements. Make sure they're nice and clean, no scratches, no marks in the coating. A few little marks won't actually impact performance, but they do impact the value of the lens. So don't pay top dollar for a lens with scratches on the front. Okay, so you've checked the cosmetics, you're happy with that. You've checked the mechanics, you're happy with that. You've checked the optics, you're happy with that. If you have the opportunity, it's always a good idea to stick a test film through as well. But if you're happy with those checks, you can be confident it's a good, reliable lens. You can be confident it'll serve you for a long time to come. So I hope that's been useful. If you have any comments, please stick them in the box below. Otherwise, subscribe and like, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.